could not believe that a whole nation could grow so mad as the Nazi socialists did. Mm-hmm. And therefore they said, poor dears, they must be dreadfully distressed about something. Give them something. Appease them. What is the trouble? But you see, the more they appease, the more frightful the attack.
Because you can't appease paranoia. Every psychiatrist in the world, in any court of law, can tell you that the way to deal with paranoia is not by appeasement. And but we didn't have any psychiatrists in power politics at the time. We simply had sort of goodwill and futile, humanistic.
Well, this thing has to be settled now. It has to be. The one dread that I have is appeasement. Some attempt now to call this fight off before it's fairly finished. You back up the British because we can beat the National Socialist. We don't want a single American to die as an American soldier in Europe. But don't get in the way when it comes to a settlement. Don't let them off, because this has to be a decisive fight. And at the end, we've got to have all the world disarmed so far as the air goes, because there'll be no peace until there's a complete control of the air by the civilized forces in the world.
Who do you include as among the civilized nations, Mr. Mill?
Well, the three nations that can put over peace in the air at the present time are America, the British system, and Russia. And if you can make friends with Russia, Russia is a very difficult, fickle country, and you may find a lot of difficulty in making friends. But if you can work somehow with the Russian, then you can now make peace in the air for all time.
Well, wouldn't you have to appease Russia?
Why appease Russia?
Why appease Russia?
I don't understand such a question.
Well, to recognize her conquests.
What conquests?
Of the Baltic countries and Finland.
Wait a minute.
Listen to that. We English have had a lesson about that. We let the Germans push their airports right up to the English Channel. We let them put guns that can fire into Dover. We had our time over again. We should certainly have bombed Berlin when we were right up on the French frontier. And we should have taught them the mischief of trying to make war in somebody else's country. Now, the Russians have done nothing but push back the German bases so that they can't do a blitzkrieg on Moscow.
This has been misrepresented as imperialism, which is, of course, absurd, because if Russia was bound for imperialism, which is inconceivable anyway, considering the internal economy of Russia, they certainly would have behaved in a very different way.
How would America behave if you had guns commanding the approach to New York on Staten Island, if you had a brave little foreign country in New Jersey, if you had Nazi bases creeping up through the French colonies, creeping up through South America, so that presently it would be quite an easy job to bomb New York. Would America wait for it? Is America waiting for it today? No. What you are doing as fast as you can is pushing back any possibility of getting bomber planes over America.
By that you refer to our air bases in the Caribbean and the Atlantic.
Yes, and in preventing any settlement of an air base anywhere that can threaten. That's the obvious policy. Have the Russians done any worse than that? Aren't the English now bitterly repenting of the fact that they didn't bomb Berlin when they could have bombed Berlin quite easily, and that they've allowed the German bases to creep forward so that every night we get the raiders over the mouth of the Thames and that sort of thing. You see, learn from us.
Mm-hmm.
If you learn from us, you not only find your own policy clear, but you also see the reason, the good, sound, common sense of the Russian action with regard to the Neva and with regard to the Kherson line.
Well, Mr. Orson Welles, don't you agree that the press and other mediums of public opinion in this country have painted the Russians pretty much villains?
Oh, naturally, and appallingly so. The foreign correspondents working on American wire services are emotionally unprepared to deal sensibly and in a neutral and decent way about the whole Russian business. And the press represents, for the most part, vested interest in America, and therefore the whole Russian picture has been so falsified as to make it almost impossible to discuss with the ordinary intelligent American the Russian position. It's a great tragedy because perhaps the hope of the world is some sort of alliance with Russia. I'm not speaking of a communist revolution.
But an
understanding with the aims of Russia, no matter how much we may quarrel with the administration of the Russian ideal. After all, it's not too foreign from the democratic ideal, but the democratic ideal has chosen to divorce itself from this, and this choice has been made by vested interest, by people who shake with terror at the mere mention of any sort of equity in world affairs.
Well, didn't you say today, Mr. H.G. Wells, that Russia was considerably Tory even yet? They haven't...
He used the word Oriental Toryism, which is a very interesting phrase and needs a good deal of...
But all the same, they have every interest in the world in coming to some arrangement for the suppression of air war. They don't want it. They've got much too big a part of the earth to develop themselves, to want territory in Europe.
The administration of the socialist state in Russia is, after all, none of our affair. We may criticize the Ogpu, and we may not like the personality or the methods of Mr. Stalin, but the fact remains that there is happening in Russia something which is in the direction of progress. We cannot deny progress. If we do, we step backward, and stepping backward is suicide.
Mr. H.G. Wells, I understand you've written a new book.
Yes, I've...
very great book.
Put a lot of... Orson's a good fellow.
Sensible, too. Discerning, yes.
Yes.
No, that's true.
Yes, I've tried to do the mental attitude of two very clever young people, two university students, towards the world, how the world looks to them and what problems they have to face. It's a book for the young, about the young.
And it's a very young book.
It's very, thank you.
And what is the name of your book?
I think for a man that I've only met in 2 days, Orson's a very loyal cousin of mine.
What is the name of the book, Mr. Wells? Babes in the
Babes in the Darkling Wood.
Is it,
not Babes in the Wood, but Babes in the Darkling Wood.
Because is it realistic or any fantasy in it?
Oh, no, it's quite realistic. They just talk away at their troubles.
Most of Mr. Wells's novels are realistic, but it's a misconception. It's assumed that a man who could say that the air arm of a country is the most important thing about a country in the future, that such a madman must certainly write nothing but fantasy.
Well, gentlemen, it's with great reluctance that I have to say our time's up. This has been one of the real pleasures of my life. Ladies and gentlemen, you have been listening to Mr. H.G. Wells, the famous British historian and author, and Mr. Orson Welles, the theatrical genius, who met for the first time in San Antonio yesterday and have honored us with their presence tonight. To you, Mr. H.G. Wells, and to you, Mr. Orson Welles, my heartfelt thanks for your kindness.
KTSA, San Antonio. We present